welcome back to the channel. I apologize for the dearth of content since since a lot of you subscribed. I have not had access, as you can see, to my regular filming space in a very long time. And I have wanted a break from content creation, but I am back now. And one of the things that I want to do on the channel, as opposed to my blog, is talk about the fun books that I'm reading. I've been talking about books that kind of, altered my DNA in kind of a serious way on the blog, but that's not the only reason I read. I started doing not really a group on Fable, but I have a list, and I read from this list frequently, called Revolutionary Reads. Political books, social justice books. A huge part of my current community building is to build community through finding people who like to read the same kind of books. And something I've noticed recently is a pushback against books and reading in social justice spaces. And I'm hoping that once fears about the election sort of dissipate, that there will be less of a pushback against reading. Every time I tell a liberal, for the love of God, read a book, when they talk about, what are you going to do about revolution, right? They are so fixated on this idea that revolution has to be violent, right? Or that an uprising necessarily includes violence, or that will, mete out violence on literally every single person in the population. And that is not the case. And people would know that if, one, they read a book in the first place, and two, when they were advised to read a book once they have shown their asses about this subject, maybe they'll stop pushing back. Because it's pretty, I was reading the book Revolution in Our Time, the Black Panther Party's Promise to the People, and you can't read these books and know the history of the Black Panther Party and still believe in the system. I have a video pinned to the top of my TikTok profile of a picture of the police who murdered Fred Hampton with shitting and grins on their faces. And people are voting for a cop. And not only are they voting for a cop, they're celebrating that cop, and they're refusing to hold her accountable for her record as AG and district attorney in California. Because holding politicians accountable will make them lose, okay? If holding Kamala accountable for her record of incarcerating trans women in men's prisons and refusing their gender-affirming, life-saving treatment, if I'm not allowed to say, hey, Harris administration, what are you going to do to ensure the safety of trans women in prison? If I'm not allowed to say that, then what's the point? And again, if people were less, I feel like we sort of spun off the rails with the whole, you don't need to read or be able to read or understand things as, to understand, these big socio-political issues. That's an ableist idea. But here's the thing. Being unable to process this information or to read or whatever is different than being just flat out unwilling. Right? Like, it is very difficult for me to digest esoteric and academically worded books, right? And I don't think anybody who's read the Communist Manifesto would argue with me that Karl Marx is a little bit, you know, like the written equivalent of trying to speak with marbles in your mouth. Like, but I still did it because The Capital and the Communist Manifesto are two of the most important books as far as understanding the basis of communist practice and praxis. Like, YA versions exist, audiobook versions exist. There is a version of the Communist Manifesto that you can download into your Libby app that will read the text for you and then vocally guide you to the references and whatever in the sources. And like, I'm begging people, I am begging, especially white people, white LGBTQIA plus people, especially, please stop pushing back against any suggestion that you educate yourself with claims of ableism. This election is going to determine wholly the fate of disabled people in the United States. Watering down the very real, very deadly ableism that affects disabled people every day by saying it's ableism to say, yeah, no, you should be well-read. Like, I talk about it in my blog on Revolution in Our Time, but I'll say it here. To be a member of the Black Panther Party back in the 60s and 70s, you were required to read and required to be able to participate in conversations about what you read. And not only that, you were required, yes, required, to have the entire California State Penal Code memorized. This was 100% what was responsible for the efficacy of the early Black Panther Party and the unity and solidarity of the early Black Panther Party. It wasn't until they stopped requiring reading and intellectual engagement with the community that you started seeing those fractures and fragments within the group, right? It wasn't, you know, oh, let's read this book or read this book, and that was what the infighting was about. They stopped putting an emphasis on that intellectual development, and that's when the party started unraveling. I genuinely believe that giving white people a word like ableism simply, it is the most misused concept online entirely. And then I call people out, big creators, for causing harm by using things that are actually ableist, that have been decided ableist by the disabled community for like a decade now. And I get told, oh, no, that's blowing it out of proportion. If your praxis doesn't include disabled people, what is the fucking point? From each according to their ability, to each according to their need, describes able-bodied people? Like, communism, I feel, is explicitly meant to protect and uplift disabled people who can't work. And I wholeheartedly believe that you are doing it wrong, that you have not fully understood communism if you don't understand how disability fits into that framework, right? From each according to their ability to each according to their need. One of the core, most fundamental tenets of communism. But it's ableist to tell you to read a book. Not anymore. Not anymore. The reason why the civil rights movement was successful, I say that in that we're still fighting the same fight, but for the time, successful, right? Is because they didn't have this concept, this word for white people to fall back on, to say, oh, I can't be bigoted, right? You see the conversation about social hierarchy and white woman tears. It's not ableist to tell autistic people, no, you do understand, at the very least, the basic fundamentals of racial hierarchy. That is not ableist to say you really you do understand, because it's basic. It's not, like a group of kids in school trying to make sense of who's at the top of the group and who's at the bottom. Anyone with a brain, right, knows that black people are at the bottom and that white women tears get black people killed. That's why I stopped talking about ableism on my platform on social media, because it literally is used by white people until it is no longer used by white people as a distraction. I don't see any purpose in addressing it, because 9 times out of 10 when people talk about, oh, that's ableist, it's simply to distract from white people or a white person in particular being called out for something. Reading is important. Reading is fundamental. Like, you think it's a joke, but it's not. Not a joke. Reading is a fundamental part of revolution and maintaining the revolutionary spirit. Full stop. So one of the things that I'm going to be talking about going forward is how even reading your books for fun, right? I am currently reading the Nightfire. I don't know why they call it the Nightfire Quartet when there's only 3 books. It's a trilogy. But how even reading fun books can be revolutionary. So if you are not already subscribed, go ahead and do that, and make sure that you ring the notification bell, because I'm gonna try to get active on my community tab on my channel as well, because TikTok is on its way out. It's gonna get banned in January. I'm pretty done with that. So YouTube, subscribing, follow me on Fable, Instagram, or Threads, and obviously subscribe to my Ko-fi. That's where you can find my blog content. If you haven't yet, I'm super proud of my blog about the invisible life of Addie LaRue. It got people to read the book, which I wasn't even intending to, for it to be a review. It was more of just a, hey, this is my personal feeling about the book. And like half of my following read the book after they read that blog. I also have a blog about, like I said, about the revolutionary reads. So that's a good place to start if you intend to follow for that content. I plan on making a video about John Waters' books when I'm done reading Role Models. I will turn that into video content instead of blog content. So again, like, subscribe, make sure that you are following on all platforms, and I guess we'll see you in the next video, and happy reading.